these are the risks that the developer has to take. So that's the reason why when it comes to GLS side, you got 10 to 15 bidders. It was very straightforward. Like on the en-bloc side, you have developers who will take certain view because there's a lot of hidden, there's a lot of unknown.
Right now, I have the benefit of having CEO of the assembly place and also directors of sales and marketing, ex-director, Mr. Eugene Lim, to share his insights with you. And he has successfully unblocked more than 10 developments from year 2016 to 2018. And this is a bit of his accolades over the last 10 to 15 years. Okay, so previous roles and achievement, he has actually over here hit the head of project marketing in Knight Frank at a tender age of 27 from year 2012 to 2016. Okay, he's also was the director of marketing and sales of Oxley Holding from year 2016 all the way to 2021. And then of course today, basically he is the CEO of the assembly place, and during his helm in 2016 to 2021, he has managed to unblock more than 10 developments within that 2 to 3 years. Okay, so this is some of the write-ups that we get from, of course, the article. This is basically by some of it is by Asia One, some of it is by basically some of the portals out there. Right. So you mentioned that from a high flyer commando to student to real estate agent to a founder of a co-living startup which manages 550 homes with a total valuation of 250 million. Okay. And he was the youngest team leader at the age of 26 when he was the senior vice president of a local brokerage firm back then. Okay, then of course, next thing we then see that he also empowered many launches in Singapore, even in Singapore, London, Malaysia, and Cambodia, and also holds a regional role covering Singapore projects. So over here, let's welcome Mr. Eugene Lim, and I will basically get him to say hi to all of you before we start with the questionnaire. All right, let's welcome Mr. Eugene Lim.
Hello, KS, can you hear me? Hello, everyone. Good evening.
Yes. Hey, good evening, Eugene. Okay, so I hope whatever I shared just now was very, very so-called intense, and of course with Eugene's level of experiences, there will be some questions that will be going through a dialogue with him. So the first question here, right, for Eugene himself, given most of the recent successful en-bloc within urban transformation planning area like Flynn Park, Maxwell House, which are within the Greater Southern Waterfront Initiative, are there instances where LTA and URA planning condition decreases the site attractiveness for en bloc? Have you actually come across these planning restriction before?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, KS. Thank you so much for introducing me such a high pedestal. I started off in the industry 15 years ago as a real estate salesperson, so I was very privileged and honored to work alongside with the best people in the industry, with my ex-bosses. Of course, very honored, especially in year 2017. I believe everyone here will remember 2017. There was a wave of en bloc going through in Singapore. Some of the ex-HUDC like Rio Casa, Serangoon View, all these were en bloc. So I think in Singapore now, basically, we're left with 2 more HUDC in the market. I think Bradder View, another one, I think it's at somewhere in the Jurong Lakeside area. So I think those are the 2 left under the HUDC side. So I was very privileged to work alongside architect, consultants. That's through that 6 years, I gained a lot of knowledge in the en bloc. So of course, in the process of en bloc, right, is unlike GLS side. In Singapore, we only got for developers, there's only 2 kind of land that we can purchase. One is either through collective sale meaning en bloc, it could be singular owner or it can be multiple owner. Of course, if it's a singular owner, things are easier, right? You only manage one owner. But if it's a 200, 300 existing home seller, then the en bloc community need to be formed. At the same time, you need to have consultancy company like the likes of Knight Frank, Jones Lang, CBRE, who has to, go and handle all these sales committee. So GLS side is much simpler. Government, every half a year, our government release some site for developers for us to bid. So those are very clear cut. You got a thick pocket of doctrine for us to follow. How many units can we build? What is the do's and don'ts? Is there commercial element? So those are very straightforward. But for en bloc, it's slightly more tricky. because wherever the block committee, through the advice of the consultant or through the advice of the lawyer, can advise you on how many units you can build, what to build, what not to build, right? But a lot of time you have to go through planning, you have to go through development control. In Singapore, we are in a very transparent system. We have URA, we have LTA, we got NEA, we got MPAR. So even a singular 100-year tree in the development, it's not as if we want to cut, we can chop off everything. We have to preserve some of the trees because NEA will come involved. So one of the more tricky part of en bloc when developer, we got the site, I think KS has covered very well, the DC, the development charge. In order to incentivize, to increase, to max up the plot ratio, of course, the consultant can give you, okay, the development charge, plus the land price is going to give you, example, 950 per square foot, plus the top-up lease. But what a lot of people do not know that things will change because every few months, our DC rate will increase. So sometimes the cheap value will based on the bid price, even though the development charge may be $200 per square foot. But if we bid, when we overbid or we are bullish in our bid, when the market is hot, right? The cheap value will based on the latest transacted price, and use that as a valuation, as a basis for our development charge. And when that happens, the whole feasibility study will change. Our profit will go lower, the cost will increase. Example, I remember when we en bloc one of our mega project, it was told to us as it would cost us $690 per square foot, plus lease top up, plus DC. But actually, at the end of the day, when the DC increased, right, we pay additional $50 per square foot. So these are things that we will come across. That is the valuation department. Second thing is traffic. I remember a few years ago when we were en bloc, when we purchased the en bloc Kent Hill residences. Yeah, that was the former. Yes, suddenly forgot the Vista Park. Yeah, so Vista Park was a very interesting thing because a few years ago, so many people got en bloc, right? So LTA very anxious. LTA said, wow, today this development only got 120 units. But because of guideline, you can do 580 units. So LTA get very anxious. They say that, wow, if that's the case, can the traffic, can our road, support the number of cars, the number of residents? If you realize over the years, the average number of size of unit increases. I think KI just now did a map, right? You got Pasir Panjang, you got Kovan, you got Shelford, you got Telok Kurau. Over the years, even Kovan area, over the years, the average size developer have to build is 100 square meter. You all know why it's 100 square meter. It's not suddenly authority just plug the number from the sky and say that today I decided to do 100 square meter. We are in a very transparent system. We got very good governance, as I say. So today, imagine 15 years ago, because I'm in the industry 15 years ago. So my first project I actually did was in Telok Kurau. If you all remember, among the audience, 15 years ago, there's a lot of all these boutique development suddenly coming out in Telok Kurau. If you remember, some developer buy a bungalow, they make it to become a 24 units apartment. So the market was booming. Once developer launched, everything starts selling. But there's a big issue. If you look at Telok Kurau, some of the road is one way, and the road is very tight. So suddenly from a street of 20-30 landed property, suddenly you have 2 landed property was sold and one developer built 24 units. So multiplied by the number of cars. So what happened? Singaporean, right, complained. Say, wow, how come my estate got so many cars? And some of the development, right, there's no parking, there's mechanized car park. So the residents say, I don't want to park in my condo, I park along the roadside. So traffic jam, LTA. So that's when LTA look at it and say, hey, from now on, no. The Telok Kurau area, right? We need to control the density. We need to control the density to make sure that our roads can support the number of headcount staying in that area. So that's why the 100 square meter evolved, from Telok Kurau to this. So these are some of the things that we face. Example, one of the latest rule during my in 2017, when we bought is Vista Park. Then that's when authority LTA say for all en bloc site, all developer need to go through this PAFS survey called PAFS. I think a lot of you don't know what is PAFS, right? So it's called Pre-Application Feasibility Study. So you need to get a specialist to study the impact of the number of units that will have the impact on the surrounding residences and the road. So what happens is that Vista Park, which called Cambridge Residences, we are under guideline, we can, if I don't remember, we can do close to 600 units. But because of the PAFS study, right, we can't, so we have to reduce 548 because the surveys show that if you do 600 over units over there, the road just cannot support the density and the number of residents and the cars staying out there. So I think this is one of the things that we face for en bloc. So I think nowadays, developer, when you in the world of developer, we always say that GLS side is very straightforward. It's very straightforward, the highest price bid, right? But en bloc is something that we really have to take a view. Sometimes it's really a lot of risks that we have to undertake. Things like very old development, 20, 30 years, we do not know what is, to build a development on a barren piece of land like a GLS site is much easier compared to you have to demolish existing old development. You do not know what is lying underneath, things like power, decommission of the substation. So all these are unexpected surprises. Diversion of maybe the PUB pipe sewage, all these are, we will never know until we go and do our study. So these are the risks that the developer has to take. So that's the reason why when it comes to GLS side, you got 10 to 15 bidders because very straightforward. When it comes to en bloc side, you have developers who will take certain view because there's a lot of hidden, there's a lot of unknown.
Wow, that's very, very a lot of information condensed in that just 3 to 5 minutes sharing from Eugene. So that's very insightful, and I learned about the decommissioning of the PUBs, etc., which is something that you don't see with your naked eye when you are basically trying to see whether a product can go en bloc or not. And these are also additional costs, if I'm not wrong. Is that right?
Yes, these are additional costs. So everything is called all cost and impact. So when it comes to construction, when there's things that is hidden, example, some of the very old project, I think more than 30 years, we got this thing called albesto because of the old construction method, right? So when to remove the albesto, you need time and space. You need an albesto specialist to remove, and that is additional cost. Just to remove, and your construction, everything will delay because you need to remove already, you need to send a specialist to remove it, and that really need time. So all these are additional costs, which the GLS side, government land sales, you will not have all these costs.
Sure. So in terms of feasibility, visibility study, all these things are not part of the process to basically, if you were to go for government land sales side, right? So it's not a hassle and problem. So again, there are many here say that if a development site plot ratio is 1.4, right? There is basically zero chances of it getting en bloc. So is this statement true? And is there anything that, given your experiences, you have managed to en bloc something that is 1.4 plot ratio? And what was the difference here that make that 1.4 plot ratio attractive?
I think there's no formula or plus or minus whether 1.4 or plot ratio or 3, whether which one is better. At the end of the day, it's really location, pricing, and sometimes even a site give you a lot of plot ratio times 3 plot ratio. Sometimes due to site constraint, you can't even fully utilize the plot ratio. So some small, especially smaller site, when they give you very high plot ratio at 2.8, but because of site constraint, because of road line reserve, setback line, when you buy your road line plan, then you realize that there's one road line reserve red line running across your site, and your site may be probably 30,000 square feet. But once you set back it, you have to imagine you buy $1,000 per square foot per plot. So you didn't know, right? Especially people who are not familiar. This is especially even for landed property. Some people will buy landed, they are very happy, they buy a land at 6,000 square feet. Then it says $1,000 per square foot. Wow, very good, I'm very happy. Tear down to rebuild. But in real estate, it's like the lack of knowledge will kill you, we say. So when you start to get engaged architect by the road line plan, you realize that, hey, there's a road line reserve cutting across your landed property. So you have to set back your land. So your land from 6,000 become 4,000. So you give the 2,000 back to government for widening road. Then you realize that actually you didn't buy $1,000 per square feet. You actually buy technically maybe 1,250 per square foot. So same for small boutique development. Sometimes not only road line reserve, sometimes it also be site constraint and height restriction. They give you 3, plot ratio 3, you can't even utilize. So you have to add all these things. So these are all very technical things that we all look at, not just whether is it 1.4 or 2.8 or 3 plot ratio.
So 1.4 plot ratio is not the main marker, like what many so-called investors would actually ask. What is the maximum so-called plot ratio here, or what's the potential plot ratio increase? Because we hear many people buying into Geylang area and saying that, oh, when the airbase were to remove, this area is commercialized, no longer hanky-panky stuff going on, so that, you know, we see prices to be going up. So again, all these plot ratio thing is just a small factors of what Enbloc will go through on the visibility of it.